Hi there, Kendra Tolbert here. I'm a registered dietitian and yoga teacher, and I specialize in women's health, PCOS, and fertility. And today I have an interview for you. I just wrapped up the interview with Symone Mendez. You're going to love her. She is a licensed mental health counselor as well as a woman with PCOS. So I'm not going to give you much more than that. You're going to have to watch the interview to hear all of the goodness that she has to share with you. Let's get right into it.
Hi, Simone. Thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Oh, yes, I'm super excited for everyone to meet you. I've only recently met you, but I'm already
Mhm.
like fangirling. So I
Aw.
love you too. So let's jump right in. Tell me a bit about who you are and how you became a licensed mental health counselor.
Okay, so as you've said, my name is Symone Mendez. I am a licensed mental health counselor. I've been licensed for 4 years now, in the state of Florida. And so that came about, of course, through going to school. I have my bachelor's in psychology and my master's in mental health counseling. And then there's a 2 year period of interning before not before, you can take your licensure exam at any time once you finish school, but you do your 2 years of interning and then you become licensed. So I've kind of been doing this for 6 years, but the 2 years I was a registered intern. Um, and so in that time, I've worked at two different practices and also what's called a crisis stabilization unit, where I'm not sure if you've heard of Baker Act, but if someone is feeling suicidal or if they've reached out to someone and like let them know what's going on and they feel unsafe, they can be taken to what's called a crisis stabilization unit where they could be monitored for 24 to 72 hours to ensure that they are safe. So I've worked in that type of setting, which is considered inpatient, and then also outpatient, which is private practice. That's what I would prefer. Definitely a different type of work. And so right now I am still doing private practice work, but through telehealth because of the
Oh,
pandemic.
how have you been liking telehealth? How do you feel about it?
It's really funny because, so like I said, you can kind of say my career has spanned over 6 years. And so in the beginning, when I was first kind of getting into the field and learning about things, and telehealth was kind of new, I was like, I would never. It's so weird that, like, how do you connect and how do you really get through the, therapeutic process? Now I'm like, if I never go back into an office, I'm okay. Um, so, of course, we were kind of forced into it because of the pandemic. And now we're actually, I think it was just maybe 2 weeks ago or so, our office opened back up. But right now, just in this season, it's really convenient for me to continue doing telehealth because I'm also home with my daughter, and so like I split time between being stay at home mommy, and then the afternoon comes and I'm like, okay, therapist hat on, and then I become therapist. So for me, it's I do enjoy it, but it's also a convenient type of thing. So I'll probably be doing it for a little while.
Oh, I love that, and I definitely want people to know that that's an option, that you don't have
Hmm.
to go in, even when it's not during a pandemic and there's not
Yeah.
like a forced closure of offices. Like, there are people that you can reach out to, so no matter where you are, you have
Hmm.
access to care. So I
Yeah, and
love telehealth. I love
I
it.
do too. And honestly, it's funny because since the pandemic, you hear of all these different platforms like Talkspace. Of course, they're all slipping my mind right now, but there's different platforms that they just offer telehealth. And so you can be in Washington state and be talking to a therapist in Florida, but because you're talking through this app, that's what makes it accessible. And so I honestly think that although, like you said, pandemic is kind of, we're hoping it's getting to a place where it's phasing out, but things are opening back up, people are kind of reintegrating into the world, and so yeah, you'll have those people who are excited about being able to go back into in-person options, but then I also think you have people who are just like, hey, telehealth works.
Absolutely. Uh, Okay, so there are a lot of different types of therapists and lots of different types of therapies or therapeutic methods. What is your specialty? Where do you focus your attention?
So I do CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, and it kind of meshes cognitive, which are your thoughts, your way of thinking, and how your thinking impacts um, ultimately your behavior, your life, your choices, and then the B is the behavioral aspect. And so you take the thoughts and it syncs with your behavior. So if you're, dealing with anxiety and you're having racing thoughts and you're not thinking straight, and then you start making rash decisions because of that, that's where the cognitive behavioral therapy kind of comes in, and we highlight the way that you're thinking and how that's impacting your behavior. And so that's a pretty common, like a lot of people typically use that. And really and truly, unless you've gone to school or gotten some type of certification that's like that works in one particular area, a lot of therapists kind of take from different modalities, and you use what's necessary based on the client's needs. I am getting into mindfulness, and so I'm actually working on a certification in mindfulness and using that. I know yoga is something near and dear to your heart, and so trying to tie that in, just again, like with the mind and the way that you're thinking and how you're thinking really and truly impacts so much more than just I'm having these negative thoughts and I feel bad about myself. It's deeper than that. And just helping people recognize that so that they then can live healthier, more whole lives.
I love that. I love that there are so many different areas that you all can pull from to really meet the needs of who's sitting in front of you. So that's
Right.
awesome. I also read that you specialize in social media and its influence too. So I'm really curious about that. Can you tell us more about that?
So yes, it's kind of interesting because I don't have like a certification or anything in that. So the way that came about was, like I had mentioned earlier, the first practice that I worked at, it was actually the practice that when I graduated with my master's, I linked with the owner, and she kind of took me under her wing. And so that's where I did all my internship hours and shadowed and basically just kind of really learned what practicing mental health looked like. And so through that, I was the youngest person in the practice. And so naturally, I had the best working understanding of social media and just how it worked in general and who used it and who used what and this and that. So often, the other practitioners would come to me with their social media related questions. So it kind of just became this thing that I was the social media expert. And so whenever we had teen clients, I would often be assigned them so that I could relate. And then also I'd look like a teenager. So that helped too. But yeah, so it kind of just stuck that, I have this deeper understanding of social media than what other people had. And so it doesn't really come out as much now. Like I don't really talk about it, or people don't necessarily ask me about it in practice today. But I do understand how social media impacts our mental health and the issues that stem from not putting boundaries around our social media use.
Yeah, it's something that comes up a lot in sessions with my clients because they're
Hmm.
often turning to social media for help, whether
Right.
that's for health related help or mental health related help, or just to feel like they're connected. So I'm
Hmm.
wondering what sort of things did you notice coming up as a result of people interacting with social media? Like, how does social media impact our health, maybe even our
Hmm.
fertility and our sense of self worth? That's a lot of a question, but yeah.
It is, but I think in one answer, it's comparison, right? Like with social media, like I would say one of the biggest, if not the biggest issue is comparison, because you see, someone's beautiful, cushy life on social media and you immediately think like, wow, I want what they have, without realizing they're putting their, as you probably hear, it's a highlight reel. So they're putting, the greatest, best things of their life on social media. They're not showing you what's happening behind closed doors. But when we're in this space of comparison, we don't think about that. We don't think that, oh, they probably are struggling. They're just showing me what's good. You just see, wow, their life is good. I want what they have. And so, of course, because of that, there goes our self esteem. There goes just a lack of contentment. You struggle with being content with what you have because you're so focused on what other people have. And you mentioned fertility. again, it all ties into our thoughts. Like, as you know, the way you think definitely impacts what's going on inside your body. And so if you are consistently unhappy and you're maybe borderline depressed, or you're overly worried, or you're stressed, now you're going to start having physical issues because of it.
It's all connected. Now, what
Mhm.
tips do you have for people who are using social media so they can do so in a way that actually supports their well-being?
Yeah. Take breaks. If you know, like, that's it takes a lot of self-control and accountability, but taking social media sabbaticals, or just limiting your time. Like, if sometimes what I would realize for myself, I'd get on my phone to check my email, and next thing you know, I'm on Instagram. It's not what I picked my phone up for. I picked my phone to check an email, and here I am on Instagram. So even I recognize, there's times where we're just so accustomed to being on social media because it's right there on our phone. So, being intentional, and I love that's like my life word is intentional, but being intentional about saying, okay, you know what? I have to limit my social media use. And so if it means I'm not going to be on social media for 2 weeks, and so in that 2 weeks, I'm going to delete the apps and make it so that I don't have direct access, or I'm going to let somebody know, hey, I'm not accessing social media. So if you happen to see me on during this time, shoot me a text and say, hey, what are you doing? Like, because we need that accountability. As much as we want to do right, sometimes it's hard to do it on our own.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. So, what are some things that people can fill that time that they're not on social media with if they're taking this sabbatical?
Talking to people in real life. Which again, pandemic, that makes it a little hard. And I think what has made it so hard for us to kind of detach from social media is because of the pandemic. We through the pandemic, especially in 2020, when things were really like unknown and we had no idea when we could come back into contact with people, social media was how we stayed connected. So what started off as this thing of, okay, this is a great way to still have that connection with people so you don't feel isolated, has become this obsession. And so now it's like, okay, now I've got to figure out how to detach from social media and learn how to actually interact with people in real life, or find other things to do. So, if you don't have access to people and to getting together with others, finding a hobby, whether it's yoga or cooking or sleeping, because we probably don't rest enough. Um, or just, taking care of yourself, because self-care is so important and is often neglected. And that just ties right into mental health and where your mental health is if you aren't taking care of yourself. So
I love that. Thank you so much for that answer. That's
you're
awesome.
welcome.
So, we're going to shift a bit and dive a bit more into women's health. And I'd love it if you would share your women's health history or story with us as much as you'd like to.
Yeah, no, it's actually um, interesting because as far as like specialties go, relating to populations, when I first got into mental health, I was very much so focused on teenagers, and then I kind of got away from that group and kind of shifted into couples and marital counseling. And I feel like I'm kind of phasing out of that, and it's going more into women's empowerment and women's health. And I think a lot of it is because of course, we can all as women connect, but I can really connect because of my own personal health journey. So, last August, I was diagnosed with PCOS. And so, since then, it's been this journey of just trying to, first of all, better understand what even is PCOS, because there's just so much information out there and so many, oh, do this and do that, and this is what's necessary. And it's just like, oh my goodness, I don't know. Like, I don't know. So, trying to work on that on one hand, and then realizing how much mental health impacts PCOS, and just of course, our health in general, but specifically like PCOS is so delicate in that stress. Like, if your stress levels are up here, you already know you're gonna see the bulk of your PCOS symptoms. And so just really understanding that and what that means. Okay, so okay, I can't be stressed, but how do you just not be stressed? What do you do? So all that to say, like, that's been my personal journey. And so, um tying that all into mental health and wanting to help other people, like, okay, we have to be, again, the word intentional. You have to be intentional about taking care of yourself, because if you want to see results in your fertility, there are very intentional things that you have to do in order for that to happen. And of course, like, relying on God, absolutely, and trusting that in his timing things will happen. But even with that, there's still a level of responsibility that we have and things that we need to do, to prepare ourselves for when God does bless us.
You touched on so many important things, and I'm like, "Ooh, where do we go from here?" Okay, wait. Need to calm down and, regroup. So oh man, I honestly have so many questions. Okay. So my first question, I think,
Mhm.
would be like, what was it like to receive that diagnosis?
Honestly, it was more exciting than it was disappointing. And I say that because it had been such a long journey of figuring out what's wrong with me, like knowing that something wasn't quite right. But then, when trying to advocate and like do the right thing and figure it out, being told, oh, at the time I was in college, when I first realized, for me, it was irregular cycles. Like, I'm a fortunate PCOS patient in that I don't have any of the, physical symptoms. I don't have any of those things, but I have the irregular cycles, extremely irregular. And so in college, when I did notice it, and I went to my gynecologist, it was more just like, okay, you need to gain weight, because I don't know how known PCOS was at the time. You're talking, I think it was 2009. So I don't know if it was just it wasn't known, or because at that time I didn't fit the textbook. I think they look for certain things when you do think of PCOS, and I didn't fit that, so it wasn't even a consideration. So the solution was, okay, gain weight. No direction on how, no direction on what to do. So, okay, I'm like, okay, I guess I go home and eat a bunch of food and see what happens. And of course, nothing happens. And so then when I come back, the next solution is, oh, just get on birth control. So, that's what I did. And I was on birth control for almost 7 years, which is a very long time, without stopping, like almost 7 years straight. So, being on birth control for so long, and then having my daughter. And so nothing really, I didn't know about PCOS. And so nothing made me think about that. And then I had a baby. So of course, you have a baby. It's like, oh, you can't have PCOS. Like, you're good. That's not even a consideration. So it wasn't until my daughter will be 3 in July. So it was last year sometime where, I had gotten off birth control again, because I took it for a year after having her. And then when I did get off of it, it had been about 5 months or so where my cycle didn't come back. So I reached out to my OB then, who was a completely different one from who I had in college. Um, and she was like, okay, something doesn't seem right. So she, ordered the blood work and everything. So then when the results came back, I was like, well, thank you, Jesus. I'm glad something makes sense, because like, I've known for so long that something wasn't right, but nobody could help me. And so, yeah, you don't want to think about the fact that you have something or that something is wrong with you, but it's much more reassuring to know, okay, there is something and now we can work on it, versus just not knowing.
Yeah. I can see that, how that level of certainty would come, or at least direction, so you know where
Yeah.
you're headed in terms of how to address it. Yeah.
Mhm.
Now, something else you brought up God, which I am always happy to hear. So I am a dietitian, and we have been taught to be very science minded,
Mhm.
and you can't prove the presence of God. So it doesn't
Right.
always feel like something that I'm encouraged to embrace, within my clinical practice, but I can't imagine ignoring this entire part of someone's life. So, can you talk to spirituality and its role in mental
Mhm.
health in any way, as much as you'd like to share?
Yeah, so it's not that in mental health it's so like you can't talk about God, but it's definitely one of those, you approach with caution, especially with new clients. You kind of feel them out and find out, okay, where do you stand as it relates to spirituality? And if they're like, oh, God, who's God? okay, we're not going to go there. But if, they're like, oh yeah, I'm a believer, then that's kind of the open door to, okay, I can definitely work faith-based practices in. And the good thing about the practice that I'm with now is that we are a faith-based practice. And so the hope is that people kind of come in knowing where we stand and knowing that that's very much so a part of our work. And of course, some people don't read it on the website, or it just kind of gets missed. And so if at some point, I've had clients since being at this practice who have said, yeah, I'm an atheist, and it's like, okay. I won't mention God. And of course, you find other ways, in a non-disrespectful way, but I mean, spirituality is very much so a part of me. So it gets tied in one way or another, whether I say God or I don't say God. But and like I said, it's not in a disrespectful way. It's just that's who I am. But at least I know if the client has said, "Oh yes, I'm a believer," then I know I can be just completely upfront. I can bring in biblical references and things like that, which it makes me feel good because it is a part of my life, and it is something that not only do I want to share, but it helps when explaining, oh yeah, I had a daughter with PCOS, and people are like, how? Like that doesn't make sense, and I'm like, God, like it doesn't make sense to me either, but God.
Oh, absolutely. I love that. I think it's important that people know that there are people who are aligned with their beliefs and that they can
Mhm.
incorporate their beliefs into their treatment, whatever type of treatment they're seeking. That's
Right.
important to know. Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
So, what's my next question? What are some of the unique challenges that you see millennial women face when it comes to mental health and maybe their women's health or fertility concerns or issues?
So I would say accessibility, and not because of, therapists not being available, because there's definitely like an influx of therapists, but with things like insurance, and a lot of therapists don't like to take insurance. I don't necessarily like to take insurance because it's more complicated because of the insurance company, not the client. And so it's easier to just say, let cash only, self pay. But people have insurance, and most insurance plans have mental health benefits. And so um if you find a client, or I'm sorry, if you find a therapist in your area but then find out that they don't take your insurance, now it's back to the drawing board of trying to find a therapist, trying to find one that's in network, trying to find one that's affordable. So that, I would say, those are more so the issues, is affordability. And the unfortunate part is, especially for therapists that are self-pay, people don't regard mental health in the same way that they regard medical health. And so, when someone finds out, oh, a session is $100 or $150, that's crazy. And it's like, I hear you, but you would pay that much to go to your medical doctor or for this procedure or whatever. And this is just as important. And I have to make a living just like somebody else. And so it's just this, the stigma of mental health and not understanding its importance. And so not realizing that it needs to be priced at the way that it is, and then the struggles with insurance. So all of those things combined make accessibility hard.
Mm.
um, and then as it relates to women's health and fertility issues, people understanding, like finding a therapist who understands. And again, like with PCOS, because it's just so, there's so many things out there. So it's like, what do you believe? What do you understand? What do you know? And so if someone's not familiar with it, and you're coming in and you're talking about, you're struggling with fertility, and you're struggling with this, and you're struggling with that, as most PCOS patients here, they might just say, okay, well, let's work on self-image and maybe come up with like a weight loss plan or something to. And it's like, well, that's, of course, that's not the solution. There's so much more to it. And so just a lack of understanding.
So, how can working with a mental health professional positively impact someone's reproductive health or overall well being?
Hmm. There's so many benefits to it, because again, knowing that our mental health and our physical health are so intertwined. If you are talking with someone, one, the stress, you're learning how to de-stress, you're learning how to better recognize when you're stressed, because sometimes it's a matter of not even knowing. like you're just in this constant gotta get this done, go, and you don't realize, you think that that's just who you are, it's what you have to do, and you don't realize how that really and truly is impacting your mental health and then subsequently your physical health. So, speaking with a mental health counselor, whether it's once a week, every other week, just kind of checking in, having that opportunity to just decompress, let things out, and then, like I said, learn practices to be mindful, on a day to day basis, and then realizing, wow, I feel a little bit more relaxed. I'm breathing because we don't breathe enough, um, and because of that, I feel good, and that feel good turns into, like, I don't just feel good, like I feel happy, but like I physically feel good. I feel more rested. I feel more in control. I feel more relaxed, and then through that we see fertility changes, because again, we don't realize how much this impacts our gut, or how much this impacts ovulation, or even something I thought about, when you're trying to conceive and you're so hyper focused on, I'm trying to conceive, I'm trying to make this happen, I'm concerned about timing, I'm concerned about this, and you're stressing yourself out. You may not think about it that way because you're just like, I'm doing everything that I can to have this baby, but that's a form of stress, and so that stress is negatively impacting you, as opposed to it's you being responsible and checking windows and doing all these things. Like, yeah, that's what you're doing, but you're also stressing yourself out, which then is having the negative impact. And so when it's taking longer to conceive, and of course there could be other things that might be at play, but that could definitely be one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to be wrapping up soon. What is
Okay.
one thing that you would like everyone to walk away with after watching this?
Knowing that you matter enough to take care of yourself in whatever way that looks, whether it's taking a nap or saying no to something, but recognizing, like, you have to take care of you. And so if it is that you're trying to conceive, or you're just trying to protect your fertility, and just be ready for when you're trying to conceive, or you just want to feel good, like as a woman you want to feel good, you want to feel in control of your body, well, that is going to take some intentional self-care. So setting healthy boundaries, pouring into yourself, going to therapy. It doesn't have to be that you're trying to unpack things from 20 years ago. It could just be a matter of, I just want somebody to talk to, who's unbiased, who really is just going to listen and maybe provide me with some tools, or I want to learn how to be more self-aware. Like, there's so many reasons why you could be going to therapy, and it doesn't just have to be the mainstream reasons that you hear, like, oh, because I had a traumatic childhood, or X, Y, and Z happened. Like, you literally could go to therapy because you want to learn tools on how to better communicate, or how to better say no. So then you aren't so stressed because you don't have so much on your plate, because you've now learned how to say no.
The power of saying no. I am all for it, and taking naps.
Yes.
No and nap, like those winning combination. So I'm sure after watching this, people are definitely going to want to know more about you and your practice. So where can they learn more about you and your services?
So, renewedcounseling.org, that's the website for the practice with which I work. And then my Instagram, which I forget the handle from time to time, because I just created a professional one. But it is wholefully mindful.
Love it. I
Thank
love it. I love
you.
it. I'll definitely link to all of that below. So you can just
Okay.
head down to the description box and click on that, so that you can learn a bit more about Symone and possibly work with her and reach out to her. Thank you so much for being here.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me. You talking about you being a fangirl. I was a fangirl because watching your videos and commenting, and then you reaching out, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's talking to me.
Oh, I love it. I love it.